Hey everyone, this is Matthew Kent. Welcome once again to my car. Welcome to Theology on the Ground, the daily thought from my quiet time. So, yesterday I had a conversation over Facebook Messenger with a friend from college. We didn't know each other super well, but we definitely hung out a couple times. And he actually looked me up and involved me in a conversation that he had been having with some people about whether or not God exists. I would describe him as an agnostic. He didn't identify himself that way, but he said, through what he said, it's very clear that he doesn't believe in God, but his statement was that he's 60% sure that God exists. So to me, that sounds like an agnostic. He's not sure, he can't be sure. And during the conversation, it became clear, and I, hopefully in a kind way, told him, I think your position is one of radical skepticism, because he got to the point of questioning everything. And so when I asked him, hey, is rape wrong, eventually we got to the point where he said, no, I can't know for sure that there's anything wrong with rape. I can just have an opinion on it. When I asked him about science, is well, no, we definitely can't trust science, because we don't know if we're just in the matrix somewhere and we're a computer program simulation. We don't know if we can even perceive this world or this simulation correctly, because we could have been programmed to not be able to perceive things correctly. And so that's a critical point. I told him, I have nowhere to go with you in terms of, conversing, arguing, because any argument that I could use would have to be based on logic. And from your worldview, you couldn't even verify, that logic exists, for instance. Logic would obviously have to be independently validated that it exists. And the only way to do that is through demonstrating it practically, which would mean you'd have to be able to trust your observations, and he was very clear we cannot trust our observations. So that's kind of where the conversation went, and I was thinking then, and I read in my quiet time accordingly from Romans 1, because Romans 1 very directly addresses presuppositions, and the fact that all of us have presuppositions, all of us have as our foundation that some things are just certainly obvious. And for most people, the most foundational thing that they have faith in, that they believe is obvious, is that we can trust our observations. So here's what Romans 1 says. For his, talking about God's, invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they, talking about those who are wicked and will incur judgment, they are without excuse in their denial of God. Now, what's so critical, and this is in the context of establishing the gospel and starting with the notion that the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness of men. And so in chapters 1 and 2, Paul cites 3 witnesses that hold people accountable to the fact that they have sinned against God. And one of them is the fact that God is obvious through creation, and that almost everyone sins against God by violating the material structures of creation that he created. Most notably the fact that creation was designed to point back to him, and that it's obvious that God created everything. So if I were to set up 10 leaves all in a row and take you outside and point you to it and say, was this chance or did somebody do this? No doubt whatsoever, you would say somebody did that. You'd be 100% right. And it's just foolishness to believe that nothing created everything. If 10 leaves, technically it's possible, but deep down we know that's not possible. And that's just 10 leaves in a row, right? And so Paul lists a couple other witnesses that hold people accountable. One would be the scriptures themselves, and he primarily applies that to Jews. The other one, which he applies to non-Jews, is in chapter 2, and it's the arena of conscience. And that's where I tried to go in this conversation, where I said, hey, do you believe that rape is wrong? Because clearly, if there is no God, mindless matter cannot give rise to moral rules to govern the behavior of beings that it doesn't know will ever come into existence. That's a long, complicated statement, but an important one. So he never really challenged that assertion, but he just said, well, I don't think that's the only option. And where he ended up going in the argument was instead just to say, well, actually, okay, no, it's not wrong to rape anyone. But I'd submit to you, and so obviously, like I said, I got to the point where I said I can't reason with you anymore. But I think for most people, you would have to say, no, I know for sure that it's wrong to rape somebody. It's objectively wrong. It's inherently wrong. It's wrong whether the person who does the rape thinks it's wrong or not. We can hold them to that standard that they ought not do it because it's a real standard that exists outside of ourselves. It's a rule that governs the behavior of persons, so it must be personal in its origin. It's a rule that has no natural foundation to it. It's supernatural in origin. So if you believe in morality, you believe in the supernatural and a personal supernatural force. So we're not talking, pantheism or anything like that. We're talking about a theism, creator God. Obviously, polytheism doesn't work, because if there's different gods that disagree on what's right and what's wrong, we wouldn't have rules like it's wrong to rape, because we wouldn't know which God to follow. There has to be one supreme, all-powerful being who says this is the way it goes. And so if you are a person who believes that rape is wrong, I would submit to you that either you are a theist, and that is your declared belief, or you're inconsistent. And there's a lot of ways you can try to argue it, and I did a video about that. But I don't really see any way around it. Creation testifies to God. It's self-evident. Morality testifies to God. The scriptures testify to God. And, I think as Christians, that's where we're going to take our stand. We're not going to be able to convince everybody. Hopefully, with my friend here, God will change his mind, because I can't do it. But those are my thoughts for today. I really hope they blessed you. And I really hope that you are encouraged in your faith and your ability to communicate it with other people. Lord willing, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Blessings.